Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting online event from the Oxford Guild with our Collegium Global Network and our partner societies from leading universities. Today, we're delighted to be hosting a special online event in association with SEO and Redbrick Ivy on job seeking in the midst of an economic crisis. This exciting and hopefully invaluable masterclass panel discussion and Q&A will cover several industries and career paths, giving you, we hope, very useful advice, tips, and key information on navigating the current very difficult recruitment landscape. We're joined today by three successful 2008-2009 graduates who have first-hand experience of the trials and tribulations of looking for jobs during the previous global financial crisis. So the first of these panelists is Laurence Guillemin, who is the UK CEO of HelloFresh. And soon after graduating in 2008, Laurence joined BCG, where he spent 8 years rising up the ranks before moving to HelloFresh. The second of our panelists is Ash Patel. Asha is an executive director at the Nomura Group. In 2008, Asha held a place on the Lehman Brothers grant scheme when the financial crisis hit. So her story will be particularly useful to those who have cancelled job offers or internships. And the third of our panelists is Yuri Kojamirian, who spent 10 years as a successful fund manager at Majedi Asset Management and is now doing a master's at Cambridge. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for sharing your time and your insights. So we'll begin by welcoming Alice Grant, who's going to be hosting the conversation amongst our speakers today. So Alice, you're the CEO and the founder of Redbrick Ivy, of course, one of our partners hosting the session today, along with SEO. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the idea for the event today and how it relates to you.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think we've all gone through a bit of an internal crisis over the last 3 months, and wherever you are in the world and whatever age you're at, like everybody has been impacted. And I've had friends who have lost their jobs. I've had friends who've lost family members, friends who have had to move from like one side of the world to the other. I even had one of my friends, it was her lifetime dream and ambition to get into Harvard Business School, and she got in, and then she's been told that the whole of the first out of 2 years is going to be held virtually, and then you have to decide, is that worth the huge amount of money that it costs to go there? So the whole world has been impacted, and there's been huge disruption. But I think having conversations with all of my friends globally, I think it's particularly difficult for the graduating class this year, and arguably as well the graduating class of 21. And I think, personally, having graduated in 2008 without a job, and at the time doing that, feeling like it was not really a risk because I'd gone to a top university, got great grades, and I was told throughout life, like, if you do all of those things, it'll be easy, you'll get a job fine. And then, finding myself in a situation where like the global financial crisis hit, and that it was actually much, much harder to get a job at that time. And so I think what I thought of at first is when I was thinking about these things is like, well, what advice would I give to myself if I was back in 2008 now? And it is slightly different, but I think I would have done things incredibly differently. And I think, if I can, use this as an opportunity to share some of those insights with people, and have pulled amazing panelists together who all have gone through that in 2008 as well, and gone on to have incredibly successful careers, and to share some of that advice with people now, hopefully that can be beneficial to people today. And I think in particular, what I wanted to get across on this call is my ambition for bringing these people together is firstly to give people listening some really like tactical things that you can do over the next month to try and help you with your job search if you are in the position where you're just graduating and you don't have a job. And then also, secondly, I think it's really important to think about like the long term as well. And I think, it will be more difficult for the next 2 years than it would have been if you'd graduated last year. And we can't do anything about that. But I think what I wanted to show everyone on this call is that you can still go on to have incredibly successful years despite graduating in 2020. The headlines aren't, great right now. And I think if I was a graduate, I'd be feeling incredibly anxious. But it was the same as what happened in 2008. There were headlines every single day saying, we were in a terrible position that I was reading on the tube. And ultimately, everyone on this call who are panelists has gone on to have incredibly successful careers. So really to help people to learn about how they've done that.
Yeah. So you're talking about graduating without a job, but you personally then went on to manage a large team and $1 billion a year at M&S, worked with the CEO there, went to business school at Stanford, which of course is notoriously the toughest MBA program in the world. And then you followed that up with BCG, and now you've founded Redbrick Ivy. Can you tell us what tips sort of specifically you'd give to the class of 2020 or on how you can be successful even after graduating in possibly the worst year in a decade?
Yeah, sure. I think there's kind of two sides to that question. And the first is like, how can you make or help yourself be successful even graduating in a situation like this? And I think for me, the things that I did is that these next few years built a lot of resilience in me. And I joined Marks and Spencer's, which luckily, they do train people well and they had a good brand name. But then basically my huge promotion, which is to this day the biggest promotion I got, and I actually write about it a little bit on the Redbrick Ivy website if you're interested to learn a bit more. But that was actually the result of them doing a cost-cutting exercise about 3 years post 2008. And so the biggest promotion I've ever got was a consequence in some weird way of 2008. So my first 3 years were definitely tougher. And my first 3 years, I earned less than I should have been if I'd graduated in a different year. But it also meant that there was an opportunity for me. And I think if you both are resilient, you keep working hard, you keep your head down, you keep growing and learning. But you also look out for those opportunities and the things that you can do to kind of maximize on. There will be challenges that come with this situation, but there also will be huge opportunities. And then the second part of the question, which is specific advice for class of 2020, I think, in 2008, I didn't think very strategically probably about what it was I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think like I didn't really consider that, there were other options available than getting a job. I didn't really think about doing a master's, which a couple of my friends did, and then it actually benefited them having, put the job search on hold for a little bit. I think also whilst travel is maybe a bit of an issue now, there is maybe an opportunity to still travel or to try and travel mixed with maybe if you can get a professional internship in maybe a country that's a little bit less impacted by COVID, like Australia or New Zealand or even China, like the UK brand name schools or universities. There's my Americanism coming through. They're really well respected in China. They're probably going to come out of in a less bad place financially. So I think there's opportunities there. And then also, actually, so I think there are huge benefits to being young in a moment like this. And one of those benefits is that you kind of know what those next trends are going to be. And I remember in 2008, one of my friends saying to me, "You're like obsessed with Facebook. You use it all the time. I think you don't know what you want to do, but I think you should go and try and get a job at Facebook." And I kind of laughed at her and was like, Facebook, it's some like university blog where people get drunk and post those photos on the internet. Like my parents would kill me. I need to get a proper job. And she said to me, "No, like I think it's going to be huge." And I said, "I agree with you, but it's too much of a risk." And I think, what are the examples for you that might be that Facebook example? Because had I joined Facebook in 2008, I would have been absolutely set for life. So where is it that you see that you have knowledge more so than the rest of us? And how can you use that to your advantage? So overall, I think the world will change very quickly during this time, and trying to think about strategically where you could position yourself is like a great, it is an opportunity, and thinking about what makes you unique and what skills you could bring will be helpful to you in that job search.
Great, thanks so much for that. I think a lot of people will find a lot of what you said there really interesting and really helpful. So why don't I take this as an opportunity to officially hand over to you to sort of hear the stories of the other panelists.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Harry. So I think you've already introduced everyone on the call, and I think probably it makes the most sense to start with Asha. So Asha, you did all the right things at university, got straight A's, graduated with an economics or finance degree from LSE. You had done an internship, which I hadn't even done. And then you got a grad scheme in the bag with Lehman. And I think it was your first week at Lehman that you heard the news. So it would be really useful, I think, especially for people who may have had the same situation where they've lost a grad scheme or they've lost an internship. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that story and how you felt at the time?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So it was a really interesting start because I did an internship in my penultimate year of university at UBS, and it was in equity research. And actually, very quickly, I realised that's not something I wanted to do, and I wasn't happy there at all. But I also quickly realised that actually there's so many other roles within the bank, and a lot of them you don't quite sort of see when you're sort of looking around and how the general applications work. So it was quite disheartening, kind of having worked 10 weeks and sort of being quite miserable, but also kind of like not getting a job at the end, because ultimately that was the whole purpose. And I was actually part of the SEO program, and they provided a huge amount of support through that whole process. And I was quite fortunate to be able to go through, having ended in the internship, actually go through a whole round of applications to potentially land me a place in the kind of the next year. So once I graduated, so there was still an opportunity, and I kind of I sort of just took that opportunity because I didn't, like I said, land anything at the UBS. So I interviewed with quite a lot of the investment banks, and landed myself a graduate program then. And I Lehman's one was interesting for me because because it was a generalist program, and I was like, okay, this is cool. Their whole ethos is trying to find the right people, and so they recruit, and then they aim to kind of place you where you fit and where the business fits with you. So I kind of thought that was quite a nice way of doing it, rather than just putting yourself in that one seat. And I think it is hard at 21 to know what that one seat might be. And some people know, and some people aren't quite sure. So I started in Lehman's pretty much 3 weeks after I graduated, and it was a great program. Got to meet loads of people. Actually, back then the programs were a lot bigger. So I mean, there's probably about 150 of us across all the business areas, and we just had the chance to network. And I mean, I wasn't a good networker at all. I mean, now probably 12 years on, I would sort of say I've, probably cracked it and become much more confident. But back then at 2021, I wasn't. I spent a lot of time just listening how other people networked, and then sort of slowly started building my own confidence. But we sort of learned a few kind of tricks of the networking trade, which was, for relevant people or people that might resonate, I tried to at least get their name or their card, and sort of follow up with a short thank you email. And it's quite funny, sometimes you sort of think it's like the run of the mill a bit, but you don't know who you have made an impression on, and who actually, from the other standpoint, actually being someone that works within the bank, that they remember names, actually, even though you don't think that they might remember you. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to do all that. We had a great kind of program. We were going to interview with different desks, and then we were going to kind of land our like a rotation program, and then kind of 3 weeks on we would have sort of been have a home. So we've sort of finished off all these interviews on a Thursday, and they gave us the Friday off. And that weekend, Lehman went bankrupt. So I remember sleeping on the sofa the Saturday night when it was happening, kind of all through the night, just like, just checking on the TV. And it was really bizarre. I mean, the Monday, actually, when, the bankruptcy was ultimately kind of fully set, ultimately we didn't have a home. We were employed by HR. So very quickly they made a decision that they wouldn't get rid of the analysts, which was my level, but they would have got rid of the associates because they were a bit more expensive. But because we didn't have a home, we had no reason to kind of go back into that building. So I remember going up to Canary Wharf and actually sitting at the All Bar One opposite and just watching people kind of come in and out of the building. There was huge amounts of media, and actually very quickly, albeit, sort of 3 months of having done all your exams, met all the business areas, feeling like you really were going to kind of now make your start, and that all being disappointing, actually sitting outside that building that day and watching people come out with boxes of their belongings, I think it just really hit home that, and actually my takeaway that day was I haven't actually lost anything. I've lost a job at kind of I'd say fantastic institution that ended up going bankrupt, but I haven't lost anything. I don't have a mortgage. I didn't have like personal responsibilities in terms of dependents, and obviously all those, a huge amount of those people in that building did. So I kind of just, I was lucky in the sense that I was still employed by them, so I had a bit of an income, but I just sort of went away and I was like, right, so what am I going to do? I'm back to the drawing board. And that was, Lehman's was obviously the start of it, but very quickly, I gave myself 4 weeks to sort of figure out something, like some sort of part-time job, full-time job, I don't know, go traveling, would I want to do a master's, etc. And I just basically spent the month just talking to absolutely everyone. I spoke to friends in different industries to ask about their jobs. I realized basically that I didn't have a chance to be fussy if I wanted to work. I knew I pretty much quickly determined I didn't want to do a master's at that point. And I knew kind of work would be my initial path, but the investment banking industry probably wouldn't have been recruiting till the year after. And then I thought, right, well, I know having work experience is going to be beneficial. And if anything, it's probably going to open up my eyes to other roles and jobs that I probably don't know that much about. And I actually basically just spent a month just applying to what I could apply to. In the meantime, I actually sent a couple of emails to some senior guys at Lehman's. The first was in effect kind of like a heartfelt sort of short email to sort of say that I'm sort of obviously really sorry for your situation, and I wish you, it was kind of like a sort of thank you, because obviously I didn't know what was happening, so it was like, thank you for like the time that you had put into the program, and I wish you all the best in your career path, and kind of like just a few lines. And then a few weeks later, when the Nomura news was coming around, the acquisition, I dropped again just a handful of people an email just to say, as and when you know more, kind of please kind of keep us posted, because we weren't really hearing that much because we weren't there. And then on the Friday actually of the 4th week, and I had given myself 4 weeks to figure out what to do, I got a call from one of the managing directors of a team that I probably would have rotated on to offer me a job on the desk. So it did work out. Albeit I wasn't expecting it, and I was pretty much, like I said, prepared to really open up my eyes to whatever I could find.
That's an incredible story, and knowing that such a tough time for you to go through, but yet you were feeling a set of emotions for the other people involved rather than yourself. And I think that's definitely a reflection of you as a person that I know. So and I think it's interesting that you talk about that networking element that helped you then get the role at Nomura. And I know that it was 2 months before you started there, which is just an incredible achievement to go from losing your grad scheme role and finding yourself at another great financial institution only 2 months later as like a new grad, and hopefully that gives a lot of confidence to people on the call. It's interesting you mentioned network being important, but when we spoke about it, you also mentioned, which I thought was quite interesting, around what had impressed the person who ended up hiring you at Nomura, because it's quite an interesting story.
Yeah, having felt like I'd failed my internship and failed like to give an impression of who I was and my knowledge and all of that, because I didn't think I did a great job, really. I felt a little bit out of my depth in research. When it actually came to the interviews for the grad round, like I sort of sat down and I put like immensely extra effort into it all, and kind of to kind of cover all grounds. And the Lehman interview was really interesting because it was like 4 interviews with different business heads, and actually the one of the interviews, which was a big steerer, and he was actually the guy that hired me when I got the job at Nomura. He didn't ask me anything about finance. My whole prior, so when I was in sixth form and actually through university, I had just a side job at French Connection, which started as I was a Christmas temp, and I thought I'd just have a job for a couple of months over Christmas, and then then they invited me to stay on, so I stayed on for quite a few years on the weekends. And actually my whole interview was around customer service, and he was the head of sales, and he wanted to know how I would approach customer service, and actually all my answers came from how I approached customer service at French Connection, like knowing your client, knowing your product, being bespoke to your client, not using the same approach with everyone. And actually they're all actually things that I do now in my sales role. Not every client is the same, even though kind of from the outside it might look the same. I would have never have thought actually that kind of weekend job, at French Connection, would actually serve such a strong purpose. But like I said, it actually, a lot of those skills in a different way transpired to help me really well in my sales role now. Just again, a different product and a different client type. So yeah, I would have never have thought that actually. For me, that actually felt like a really easy half an hour, but I guess however I could articulate it, I hope came across quite strong.
I think that's a really incredible story to think about, because I think, having worked in a department store when I was doing my A-levels as well and a bit through university, I didn't really think that those types of jobs would help me in a professional interview setting, like especially finance ones. I mean, I didn't apply to financial institutions, but I just wouldn't have thought that they would have thought that that was credible. And I think that it's really interesting to hear that actually those skills that you may have picked up over the years in jobs that you didn't think were like professional roles, actually those, whether it's a project or it's being a captain of a sports team or something like that, those roles, or in this case, working at French Connection, those things can really help you in your applications and in your interviews and in sharing your ability to learn and what you've picked up from those experiences and how you can then apply that to a next role. So thank you.
I think ultimately, just on that point, I mean, I think any work experience is extremely useful. I mean, you in the corporate world, you learn your job role, like, unless it's not kind of like being a dentist, and you spend that 5 years at university learning those skills. Like, say in my role, like, I very much learn it on the job, and therefore it's all the previous skills of help you kind of apply yourself to situations. I mean, when I started on the Nomura desk, we were a merged desk of the Nomura team and the Lehman team, so it was huge. So there was restructuring literally happening every 3 to 6 months, and it's again how you apply yourselves to the situation, and I guess put your head down and get the work done, or want to learn about what's happening, because even that first year in was not a usual first year. I mean, graduates were never used to get fired in their first year. That wasn't the case. You know, we lost graduates within 3 to 6 months of the acquisition happening, and for me it was just like, I knew it would be sort of a slower grind, and that was fine. You very much just had to work with what was given to you, and the more you could sort of be at their disposal and kind of pick up anything and everything, even if it wasn't like part of your job role, then actually you became more valuable over time.
I think that's incredibly valuable advice, and I completely agree. And it was very similar in my situation as well. And I think that's one of the pieces of advice that I think, if you find things you're interested in and you offer to help with those, like for free essentially at work, it will help lead to additional responsibilities in the future. Anyway, thank you so much, Ash. I think we're going to have to move on now, but thank you so much for sharing that experience with everyone. It's really inspirational to hear how quickly you were able to get a new role. So moving on to Yuri next. So Yuri, hi. You have led a successful career as a fund manager. You graduated 2007 from Cambridge, followed by your master's in 2008 at LSE. And I think, so you have another interesting story about what happened in 2008. Do you mind sharing that with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep it brief. So I had a similar sort of path trying to discover what it was that I liked to do. I did a few different internships. I kind of swung from, I actually also worked at UBS, an investment bank, at ECM for one summer internship. Then I did economic consulting. So I was trying to kind of feel my way out. And I discovered quickly that I kind of really liked investing. So that summer, I had an internship right after my master's, which is a little bit unusual, but I had it in the back of my mind that I was going to take a year off or go traveling or do something like that. So I had an internship at Goldman Sachs Asset Management. And I very clearly remember the time because, you turned on the screen and all of these events were happening, that at the time when you're so young, it's really difficult to get your head around that the world was sort of changing massively. So I was, working long hours at Goldman Sachs, and I remember I really didn't enjoy it either, for lots and lots of various reasons. A lot of it had to do with like the hours and the workload and just some of the people there I didn't really enjoy. And I think that's maybe an important lesson as well, which I think came across from Ash's the talk, is that people really matter. The people you're going to work with, the people you worked with. So it came to the end of the internship. They offered me a job, and I basically said no. And then the managing director tried to convince me, several phone calls. And what I decided was, this is just not for me. And I remember very well the same Friday that Asher just described, I basically said no to the managing director as a final time. The weekend passes. And then on Monday, Lehman Brothers goes under, which was kind of the cataclysmic event of the global financial crisis. And obviously I'm sitting there with my hands, my head in my hands, just thinking I've made a massive mistake. I kind of, basically, not to use profanities, but messed things up. And I turned on this amazing job that could have been very secure over that period. So I took a bit of time off. I focused on the things that I really liked, which was reading about investing. And that was an area I was really interested in. That internship was about that as well. And then I just said, I'll just take a bit of time, let the world cool off. And then as 2009 rolled around, I started applying for jobs. And that's kind of the story here, which is that, yeah, you get something thrown at you, you maybe make a mistake. At the time, that seems like a mistake. But I'm actually very happy the way things turned out. I was applying for a lot of jobs, which is sort of the reality of applying during a crisis. People often say it's not a numbers game. Focus on the things you like. So I focused on investing, but in investing, it was a numbers game. I opened the FT, I looked through every single company, and I just sent off applications. I called up people I knew. I tried to find out what all this industry was about, etc. And there was a bit of an opportunity, like a spark of opportunity within that, which is good firms, particularly within finance. They basically survived the crisis really well. And they were the ones that are sort of hiring people. Firms like Nomura, for example, that came in, took advantage of the situation and just said, okay, we're going to hire people. And Majetti was exactly that kind of firm. They had sailed through the crisis. They'd done quite well, and they were hiring people. And so even though it might have seemed like really tough and the competition was really tough, you actually almost self-selected into a really amazing firm, which is what happened with me. And I haven't looked back since, and I certainly don't regret the decision of turning down Goldman's at the time, even though it seemed like the stupidest thing to do. So that gives you a bit of an idea of my experience over that period.
That's amazing. I love that example, because I think, I think I can so imagine you kicking yourself on that Monday and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And I think, it's great that you followed what it was that you genuinely wanted to do, and then it worked out great in the end. And I think that element of kind of, like you say, being authentic to yourself and following your passion is really important, irrespective of the time. And talking of that, I think it's so interesting how you were so focused on asset management, because from my perspective, graduating at 21, like I think my biggest issue was my indecision and my lack of awareness over where I wanted to focus my attention, and that made the process like very difficult and hard. And I ended up taking an opportunity, but especially at the first few years, like wondering whether I, should have done something else. And can you just, if there's anybody else on the call, like who is also going through that, like indecision, could you maybe talk a little bit about how you came to realize that you wanted to go into asset management?
Of course, really happy to do that. I think the number one thing I would say is that it's completely normal at 20, 21 to absolutely have no idea what you want to do, and also have no idea what things are out there. If let alone the way Ash was describing kind of what different divisions there are within Nomura. The world of finance is huge. There's lots of different industries. It's difficult to know what it's about. And the most important thing to do is just to try things out. That's how I kind of weaved my way in. So I started at UBS. I knew sort of that ECM style investment banking wasn't really for me, just because I was very, very driven by sort of reading and understanding how the markets worked and all of this kind of stuff. And for me, it was more the investors that we were talking to at ECM that actually kind of attracted me. I was like, oh, this is really interesting what they're doing. But this intellectual drive drove me to a completely opposite direction, which is to do this economic consulting, which is quite a cerebral type of internship for economists. You do a lot of academic work. And I realized that it wasn't quite what I wanted. So I swung kind of back into the financial world. But at that point, I had caught the sort of investment bug, which I picked up at UBS. And I just started reading a lot about investing. I mean, when I say a lot, I read all of the time. And that was what interested me. And I think you catch that and you start reading and you start exploring, and this whole world opens up. And Goldman Sachs was another way into that. That was in the asset management side. So I was like, okay, well, this is going to be real. I ended up working in the private equity group, something you can't really control where they sort of place you in some of these banks. It was a great experience. But again, I loved the investing side. And what the private equity group did was more invest in other funds. And that wasn't really something that attracted me. So I knew when I had finished what it was that I wanted. And every spare moment I had, I was just reading online blogs about finance. And I was just trying to understand what this crazy thing, investing in stocks, was all about, because it just struck me as the most difficult intellectual challenge, that, at least for me personally. And it just came to you, it sort of just happens, and you have to try a few things out and not like certain things and not be afraid to say, that's not for me. What is it that's interesting for me? That's what got me to the investing side.
That's great. And so you write a blog now, is that right? With some of
that's right. So one of the, obviously it's a passion of mine, reading about finance and things like that. And one of the things I did through my 10 years working at Majetti is kind of find interesting nuggets of information. And I would obviously share it with the investment team at the time. After I left Majetti, which was last year, I just needed a bit of an outlet to kind of present these interesting ideas I find. And it's actually, what you find about investing is it's extraordinarily broad. There's a lot of interesting topics that fit into the investment horizon, because if you sort of just think of it conceptually, something is relevant to a company somewhere around the world. So everything is supposed to be interesting to an investor in that way. So what I've done is I've started a blog. It's called Snippet.Finance. And it's just a creation of really tiny little snippets of interesting information that I found online, a chart, a link to an article. Check it out, see if you enjoy this kind of thing. It's kind of my passion child about the interesting things that I find online. And I think it's sort of going to be quite helpful for people when they go into interviews, especially if you get asked questions like, tell me something interesting you read. And especially within asset management, investing, and finance, it's often really important to show that you have this intellectual curiosity about the world and that you're sort of well read, but maybe perhaps not the most typical channels like the FT or the Wall Street Journal, and that you can find interesting things of information you can tell the people at the interviews or whenever you get the job to impress your boss as well.
That's great. Thanks so much, Yuri. I think, yeah, anyone looking at asset management definitely knows where to look to get some insights pre their interviews. And really, really interesting to hear some of your advice there. And, you know, particularly around how you found out that you liked asset management just from, and it still obviously shows to this day, like, you know, 12 years later, that it was the right decision, that you wanted that and you went after it. So I think it's useful for everyone to understand that still takes trying different things first to recognize what it is that you're really passionate about. So I think, you know, don't be afraid to try, and I think failure to like something isn't a failure, because you're still learning from that experience, and then you can move in a direction that you want. And if I can just add to kind of what Yuri was mentioning, I think a lot of people I know still don't know what they want to do, and those things can change. So Yuri is very lucky in that he really still loves asset management, but you might not feel that way throughout your career. And what's great about careers now is that you can move around a little bit, which actually probably moves me on quite nicely to Laurent. So thank you so much, Yuri, for sharing those insights. Really appreciate that. So last but definitely not least, we move on to our superstar CEO, Laurent, who I was lucky enough to work with at BCG. So you've obviously done incredibly well to rise up the ranks so fast. You're in your early 30s and, you know, a CEO already, which is just not something that you generally hear about. So you went to Oxford, graduated from Oxford 2008, and then went on to do a master's. Could you talk to us a little bit about the journey that led you to become a CEO at such a young age?
Sure, and thank you for the intro. So actually, it's been quite interesting listening to everybody so far, because it's really brought up some similarities in some of the past and some very similar things. And Alice, when you asked me a week ago about the path I took, actually not everything came to light, which I wanted to talk about now, and there are a few things extra. So first of all, I think it is. I remember back to when I was 21, leaving university, and the job market is incredibly opaque. It is very hard to know what different jobs actually are in practice, what it means to be a management consultant versus what it means to start in digital marketing in a big consumer company versus going into investment banking or whatever else. So I think as much as possible, a first tip, and I know you haven't asked me for tips, but a tip is to try and go to as many different careers fairs, understand different jobs, speak to friends. Asha recommended it as well when she was changing jobs, and really just understanding what different jobs entail, I think is very important. So for me, and the reason it ties in for me is because I remember back to when I was 21, and I went to actually it was a BCG event, and it told me about what management consulting was, and it opened the world of management consulting. I had no idea what I wanted to do beforehand, and maybe I took a bit of a leap to go into that career profession as well, because I'd seen a little bit about it, and I'd also found out that you work on lots of different things as a consultant, so you get to see many different things. So that was the first one. Anyway, I applied then to a load of different companies and got rejected by quite a few. Didn't get an interview at BCG, and did get a job offer from a different consulting company, and decided off the back of that to defer the job offer, but to go into a master's. So invest in learning, which I think is a very important thing as well, is trying to learn as much as possible and figure out what skill sets you want to invest your time and effort in as well. So I went off to Paris, did a master's. It was very interesting, great experience. And then I reapplied to a few different management consultancies and applied to BCG again. And this time I did get an interview and was lucky enough to get a job. And then after that, I spent 8 or 9 years at BCG, and I think some of the things which I found the most interesting and very lucky to be able to do with some of the different opportunities there. So I think as much as possible, taking advantage and making the most of the different opportunities that are available to you. So for me, that looked like going off to do a secondment for a charity, so Save the Children, which was a completely different kind of experience that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And also going and working in different countries. So I think it's also quite important to make the most of it, make the most of those different opportunities, and try and do something which you will enjoy and which you'll find fun at the same time. So I realise I've answered your question, but in a bit of a roundabout way there, Alice.
No, I mean, that's interesting. So you told us about the journey at the end, and at the beginning, some of those tips. It's really interesting actually hearing from you, because I think, you know, when we did have the call last week, it's sometimes difficult to remember that beginning, that 21 era, and whether or not it's hard, because once you get into the world of work, you kind of end up forgetting it. But I think, you know, it's really interesting to hear that, you know, you applied once to BCG and got rejected, and then had an incredibly successful career at BCG. And I think, you know, that alone just shows people on the call that, you know, a lot of this is going to be difficult, and you are going to face rejections, and particularly if you're applying to the top firms, that is going to happen, and there's a level of resilience that is required to keep going. And I think that's, you know, really interesting, you know, what you're talking about. And I think in particular as well, Ron, like, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think you used to do recruitment at BCG in the end. And so I thought it might be useful for you to maybe talk about the types of things you would look for when you're interviewing graduates, so people can think about how they're preparing for their interviews. Yeah, so, I mean, naturally, academic record is a bit of a given, so I'm not going to, I won't talk about that kind of thing, but I think some of the things that we look for at BCG, but also particularly which I look for now whenever I'm recruiting for roles, is motivation and passion, and that comes across quite well in interviews. And it's very clear when somebody has really done a bit of research about the company, cares about the company, and really wants to work for a company. So the first bit of advice is really do invest the time before doing an interview into looking at the company and making sure that it is the place where you want to work. So it's both sides of the coin make sense there. So I think that's the first one, is motivation. I would say second one is not just experience in the exact sector which you are working in, but showing skills which are transferable from other areas. So, for example, working as a waiter or waitress, or in a store, or whatever. These are good, like, transferable skills which are helpful. As Asha was saying earlier, she learned quite a lot actually from some of that. I waited as a waiter when I was at school, and learned quite a few things as well. So I think showing, and it's not just those school jobs or anything like that, but any kind of experience, try and pull out some of the things that you've learned from that experience. Not something I look for, but prepare for the actual interview in terms of do your research on it. I mean, if it's a consultancy interview, there are case studies, and there's a set format. So learn about it, prepare for it, that will always help you. And also just try and be as relaxed as possible. I mean, it's a conversation, and I know it's easier said than done, but there are it is ultimately a conversation to try and find some techniques which work for you in terms of relaxing or anything like that beforehand. I know it sounds silly, but no, I think that's such a good point actually, and I was just thinking about it because so you graduated 2009 and then spent 9 years at BCG. I graduated 2008, spent 7 years at M&S, and Asha still at Nomura. So I think, actually sometimes in a crisis, when you go and you work for a company that you like and you do well there, you are actually potentially more likely to stay a bit maybe of a longer period, especially because for the first few years I honestly stayed at M&S because it was a safe job and there weren't that many other jobs out there. And then I started doing really well. So I think, think about that when you are interviewing, because to Laurent's point, like, if you can find a company where you genuinely want to work and it's a good cultural fit for you, it's more likely to lead to great successes for you as well. So I just thought that was really interesting that so many of us had spent a long time at the first company that we worked for. And the final question, Laurent. So I think one of the things that you're really, really good at is balancing work-life balance. And I think you're a CEO and we work together at BCG, and I think you actually are one of the people who's very good at managing. And I thought a lot of students right now are probably wondering, they're struggling with like balancing time between applying for jobs. Am I allowed to have some time off to rest after my finals because I've worked pretty hard for them? Maybe considering like learning a new skill, like coding. There's lots of stuff on the internet right now. We're stuck at home a little bit more during lockdown, and maybe also wanted to give back to the community. Like, how do you think about balancing your time in those ways, and how might you advise them to work out what they should be spending their time on?
So thank you. It's something which I do value quite a lot as well. I think it is, first of all, I mean, work is such a large part of our lives that I think it is important to try and find time outside of work to do the things that you enjoy, and also to have fun when you are working. I think I don't really have any specific like processes or things to share, but I mean, for me, it is very important always to re-energize by doing sport. So if you are a person that finds that energizing, then make sure that you keep doing that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I think trying to put your, and you know this, Alice, from when we were at BCG, but we had something which was called PTO, and as part of it, you kind of commit to some work-life balance goals. So if there are particular things which you really want to do and which are particularly valuable to you, make sure to either block them out, to commit to doing them, and almost set that expectation and that contract with yourself that you will do them. And people have different ways of, I don't know, having a calendar and saying, okay, I will 2 or 3 times a week, I'll achieve this particular thing, and you can try and hold yourself to account on that. But I think it's just very important, whatever you're doing, to find things that are most important. I remember there was a very successful person at BCG who had a couple of kids, and he would always block out bath time with his kids, and he'd be at home at 5:30 and completely switch off. So it's just important to set those expectations, and whether it's when you're looking for jobs, when you're doing a job, where whatever you're doing, just make sure that you're doing the stuff around it, and take advantage of those opportunities for time off when you do have it.
That's great. Thanks, Laurent. Sorry, I threw that question on you a little bit, and it was an incredible answer. And the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because I think so many people on this call might be feeling really stressed right now and feel like they should be spending all of their time on a job search. And to hear from someone like you, who's gone on to be an incredibly successful CEO, to hear you say, actually, finding important things in your life that aren't just work is an important part of living, and it also helps manage anxiety. So I think that's really, really good advice as well. Thank you so much. And I think huge thank you to all of the speakers. And I think we're going to move to Q&A now, Harry, is that right?
Yes, you are. Yeah, I just want to say thanks so much, guys, for that. That was really, really interesting and great to hear. So some really different stories there. And I'm sure our audience found that really interesting as well. We've got a bunch of questions coming in, as you might be able to expect. We thought we'd start with an obligatory one about postgraduate degrees. So this one's coming from Anjali, who's doing biology at Oxford. And Anjali asks, during the difficult current recruitment climate, do you recommend that we look at doing postgraduate degrees as further study rather than braving the current market?
I think it's a question probably any one of us.
Yeah, an open question.
I could just give my view. I think it's very dependent on the individual. I know people who did it and it worked well for them. So I have a friend, for example, who didn't know what she wanted to do, went and did a master's and then ended up at Google, because by the time she kind of bided her time, then Google had opened up recruitment. I didn't do it because I didn't know specifically what a master's would do to help me. But then I went on to do my MBA later on. And what I loved about that MBA is that it's generalist and you learn about everything. And actually, I wasn't that interested in learning something to an nth degree of detail or more specific than my undergraduate degree that I got already. And so I didn't think I was really either that interested to do it or that it would help me career-wise. But I think it's very much down to the individual and what your aspirations might be. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that question as well, if you have a different view.
I mean, I would just add, I think looking into it is not a bad thing, but research it. I mean, it's a big step. It could be 1 year of your life. It could be 4 years if you do a PhD. And I've seen friends of mine who've started PhDs and then 3 years in, they've kind of wished that they hadn't or haven't taken as much out of it. So I think it's really important. I'm not saying it's not a thing to do. I'm just saying look into it. It could be a good idea, but it's not a small step to be making. So look at the exit opportunities. Look at whether you're really going to be interested and find it exciting to do as well.
I think from my perspective, I considered a postgrad, but definitely one wasn't ready to study anymore. After an intense undergrad, and two, again, like Alice and everyone have sort of said, I didn't want to do it unless I knew what I wanted to focus on. And so I thought maybe down the future, but actually, whilst the job market is difficult now, and it was difficult then, actually, when I landed myself at my job, because there was so much going on in terms of company restructuring, re-looking at the business, etc., I actually got involved in things that I've never got involved in since. And that was because I was an analyst and was able to sit and crunch lots of data and help the head of the desk at the time with things he just needed to get done. A lot of it was very strategical, and actually I learned a lot about the business in a different way that you would kind of much more from a management perspective. And actually since 08-09, once we kind of finished that whole project and those tasks, I've probably not many times had to do the same sort of look at the business from my role perspective. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that actually come up with a really difficult job market.
I mean, I would just add that I'm obviously slightly biased because I did both the masters after finishing my undergrad, and I just did another one just now. I just think, learning's always good. If you can afford it and you've got the time, and you're really passionate about something, go take the mid-career one, like Alice did her MBA. I couldn't speak more highly about that. It's a great way to just step out, kind of observe the world from the eyes of a student, be around young people, new ideas, and just kind of get reinvigorated with lots of really interesting things going on in the world. But it is very, very individual. It's sort of up to you to figure out what it is. And I think Laurent's completely right. You do need to do your work and figure out that it's for you, just like a job is sort of the same sort of thing.
Great, guys. Thanks so much for that. Here's a question about applying for jobs, I suppose, without without internship experience. So this is coming from Jay, who's doing economics at Cambridge. And Jay's asking, how can we break into competitive fields, for example, investment banking or consulting, without prior internship experience? Would it be naive to apply to graduate roles in third year without internships?
Laurent, do you feel like you could answer that on the consulting side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think doing an internship will help, but I don't think it means that you can't apply for these kind of roles. So there's lots of other experience which is valued on people's CVs. So and I don't think that just stops at academic record, but also non-academic in terms of having shown perseverance, having shown hard work in sport, or as in supporting different societies, or different passions, or charity work, or whatever. All of those things can be valued and will be valued by different recruiters. So no, I do think an internship is a good proof point, but it's not the only one. So I don't think it's naive at all.
Okay, great. I actually thought this might be a good question, particularly for Ash and for Yuri, because of course this is picking up on something you were talking about. It's about cultural fit. So this comes from Keneal, who's doing economics and management at KCL. And Keneal asks, how do you find the right cultural fit when applying for internships and jobs?
I mean, for me, I was on the SEO platform, and I know they're a partner of this course. So, but again, a couple of the guys have said it as well, just in terms of taking advantage of networking opportunities. So basically, you have to go out and speak to enough people, and that could be obviously now kind of online, or a lot of these firms have videos. But until you meet people and then can kind of meet enough people to sort of compare in a way, you don't know, and you kind of need to meet enough people within the same firm, because even kind of within firms, parts of the businesses have very different cultures. There is no that still can be may not prove you right when you land a job, and people stay places because the culture is great, and unfortunately people leave because they're not that keen on the culture. But it is just all about who resonates with you, the type of people that you end up speaking to, and then time tells.
I think I would definitely echo that sentiment. I think basically it's just about talking to people. Be sort of, not sort of often difficult, but just ask difficult questions of people. Things that you care about and you worry about. Just ask them to the people you're interviewing. And I think Laurent said this. You interview them as much as they interview you. Just kind of really live by that and ask people lots and lots of questions about it. In asset management, I guess there's certain characteristics of firms that mean they're just going to be better environments than maybe other ones. Like, if it's employee owned, if there's not like one person making all of the decisions, those tend to be a bit more kind of flat cultures that welcome people rather than ones that are a bit more closed off. But overall, it really is just talk to people and ask uncomfortable questions and ask them questions and interview them a bit. That would be my advice on that front.
And I think just back to the question a bit, it's culture's like really, really expansive. I mean, you often think at networking things you've got to speak about kind of the job role or the industry, but actually there's really important questions which are linked to work life. I mean, I'm a mum of two, and if anyone, I wish I've had a great experience with where I've been, but I still wish that when I was networking, someone sort of said to me, well, why don't you just ask them like how they are in terms of like, later on, like how they are in terms of like family balance, are they kind of, there's obviously a lot's changed with say shared parental leave and things like that. But I wish like people had just ask the other questions as well, because actually all of that fits as a whole package to make you want to work with a firm or I've been with Nomura for 12 years now, but all of that has made a difference with me actually working with them for such a long time and not moving to somewhere else.
Great, thanks so much for that. Here's a question, I suppose, about later career from Vadim, who's reading Komsky at Imperial. Vadim asks, if you could do it again, would you have done anything differently that you feel could maybe have meant you reaching the current stage in your career faster? Any regrets?
I think in terms of achieving things in your career faster, I think everyone kind of in this group is probably you sort of don't realize how much you do achieve. I think often actually as a graduate or at 21, because I was the same, it was like, okay, by 25 I want to make sure that I've like been promoted to like X level, and by like 30 or 35 or 40 whatever, I want to make sure I'm this and this and this, and actually the part of the reality is the firms know when to get the right people at the right stage, so you push along, but you prove yourself on the job, and then you push for promotions, and therefore I think things kind of happen as fast as they should, and as kind of you sort of prove yourself. I mean, and I think it's a little bit, I mean, we've seen it with people that have come into our firm where maybe they don't think that things are happening as fast as they should be, but and unfortunately sometimes they leave because they don't think they've hit that promotion, and as I don't know, a year quicker than they should have. But in the grand scheme of things, like I don't know, I'm not so keen on kind of like this speed thing, because I think it's the kind of the wrong way of kind of approaching things. I think you should always have drive and want to achieve certain goals, whether whatever they may be. But I think it's really hard to put like a timeline on it. And actually, if you get down and do the work and think innovatively and contribute to any business in any industry, you will start getting recognized and pushing forward. And I think it's much more organic.
I completely agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Laurent.
You go, Alice. I insist. You go.
I was just going to say I completely agree with that, and I think if the question of no regrets, I think maybe is the thing that everyone was like paused on, because I certainly have absolutely no regrets, and I definitely at 21 would not have even imagined that I was in the position that I'm in today, and I think that I didn't really like what Asha was talking about, like knowing what I wanted by 25 and 30. Like I wasn't really, it sounds really bad to say, but I wasn't really that ambitious. I wanted to be happy and I wanted to have a job that I was good at. And then I became ambitious because I eventually found myself in an environment which I loved and I thrived in. And to be totally honest, for the first 3 years of my career, or 2 years of my career, that was not the case. And so I think to Asha's point, things happen. It doesn't all accelerate from the beginning all the way to where it is today. Things happen as a process, and it's a very individual process to you. So the reason I don't have any regrets is because I created a career that was based on my needs and what I enjoyed, and what drove me, and things in my career that I didn't necessarily want to earn this amount of money by this stage or be this role at this stage. I just really loved it. And I think if you can find that, if you want to be successful, and that's your aim, which is kind of implied in the question, then I think if you can find that, then you will get the outcome that you're looking for. Laurent, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I've got nothing of value to add. So
Okay. Yeah. Next one, I suppose, is about different types of qualifications you can get. From Levi, who's doing philosophy at Harvard, and Levi asks, "What are your recommendations with regards to doing a CFA or ACA versus an MBA, Master's in Finance, or other postgraduate course?"
I suppose part that maybe for me on the sort of CFA, I just honestly, I don't think there's a huge difference between. I did the CFA. We all had to do the CFA in my firm. Most likely, if you enter a financial job within investments, you will do the CFA. So if you keep that in mind, then kind of if it means that you then don't, if you're doing, it's slightly like if you're doing a master's or any one of these qualifications, unless you really have to because you think you have to, I don't think you should really be doing them, because it's more about interest and what you like. So if you think an MBA, like the way Alice described it, I mean, it's a fantastic program for if you're like a generalist, you don't really know what you want necessarily, but you want to get a little bit of skills in everything. You want to meet amazing people, then that's the thing for you. And just keep in mind that there's certain qualifications you'll have to do, which is like the CFA. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
I think, I mean, I can't talk about the CFA because I never, ever even looked into doing it because I didn't work in finance, but I can talk a bit about the MBA because people ask me that a lot. And the thing I say to people, particularly in the UK, is you do not need an MBA. And it's very expensive, especially if you do it in the US. And it's there's an opportunity cost in that year that you weren't working. So there's an amount you spend and an amount that you lose out on from earnings. So if you don't genuinely want to do it, I don't think you should do it. I benefited massively from doing my MBA, and I can personally recommend the experience wholeheartedly. But if you look at it and you think that doesn't seem exciting to me, then I wouldn't recommend that you do it because it won't be beneficial to you. And I think you can maybe look at that in lots of decisions career wise as well. So it's not just whether or not a CFA or an MBA is important, it's follow what excites you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm growing slightly conscious of time just because you guys have been so generous with it so far. Do you think would you be happy to do a couple more questions, or would you rather?
Let's do one more question, and then because we've taken the panelist time out, and then we'll talk about the mentoring scheme. So maybe is there a general question that we can end on?
Oh yeah.
Or is that hard?
I was going to do one about how good a Big Four is teeing you up, but I think maybe that's too specific. Actually, this might be quite a good one. Actually, this one's coming from Matilda, who actually just graduated from an MSc in management from Durham, and Matilda is asking, how would you recommend staying confident when you keep getting rejected from your goal firms, and at what point do you think it's wise to change direction?
I would say there's one thing within that is that it's great to have goal firms, but they don't also define everything. I.e., if you can't get into goal firms, I think it was Yuri that mentioned it. It really is a numbers game with where you apply to, especially in a tough market. So whilst you should have your aspirations, if that's what it is for the top firms, you need to look in the mid-tier as well, because there's some fantastic companies out there, and actually sometimes a slightly smaller company gives you far more exposure than sometimes some of the bigger firms may be able to at that point in time. So again, going back to no experience is ever going to be wasted. I mean, you could land in a firm that you never thought you'd work for, have an amazing experience, take that and then reapply, to a role later on a few years down the line, to if you were still interested in the top firms. So I definitely think like the broadening kind of the employers, within the bucket, within the area that you're looking at is really important.
And I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. Sorry, I couldn't agree with that more. I think it is a numbers game. So head up, like people are you will get rejected from different companies, just by the chance of it. It is something that happens. But broaden it out, and maybe look at different experiences that you can do as well to change things as well. I mean, taking my BCG example as an analogy, having that master's on top changed my entry into BCG, and I did managed to go to the company that I wanted to. having different options as well on the back. So I had this other option, which wasn't necessarily the gold company that I wanted to do, but would have been a great option anyway. So yeah, Yuri, go on. Sorry.
Oh, so no, I was just going to add that, obviously, just to echo, I mean, I applied to loads and loads of places. I got loads and loads of rejections. I think necessarily it's just about trying, applying. I started at a small firm, over 20 people. It was like an exciting time to sort of, you got a lot more opportunities in a small firm. And I would just say, don't give up. And it's amazing how plastic the job market becomes once you leave the sort of confines of graduate. There is no sort of set rails. I know people who have done crazy things and gone and become war photographers and kind of come back and gotten into Goldman Sachs or BCG or whatever. And so just I guess almost like don't worry so much. It will, if you find your passion, it'll kind of happen. I know it sounds cliche, but it kind of is like that in the world of work. Everything kind of floats away. You start seeing more clearly, but it's just you can kind of find your way through all of these things. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And the only two things I would add to that is, one, if you can find somebody that works at one of your goal firms and get their honest feedback, and try to go with someone junior that through your network maybe, who can maybe give you an indication of, look, there's nobody else here that doesn't have like a master's, if Laurent's talking about it, or some sort of internship, and either go and get that to make your application better, or maybe apply elsewhere, because then you're getting a bit of feedback that you're currently missing, which is something that I definitely did. Apply to a ton of firms, and then you just don't know why you got rejected. And I've heard terrible stories about hiring managers with graduate recruitment saying, there are so many applications, I can't read all the CVs, so I just every year throw the CVs down the stairs and I pick a step that I take that group of CVs from. So I think if you remember that story, just don't take it personally, because that may be similar to what's actually genuinely happening behind the scenes. And then the second thing is a story from one of my very close friends. She was, struggling to get a training contract, and getting rejected from firms a lot. And she had this one firm that was her ultimate, like, oh my God, I wish if I'm the luckiest person alive, I'll get that offer. But she was like, well, loads of people want it. And it was basically to work for one of the media law firms. And because her background fit with media, and she'd been an extra in Harry Potter, age 15, taken loads of time off school for that, knew lots of actors and had been involved in that as like a hobby. They loved her, and she ended up getting into the firm that she genuinely really wanted, and was rejected from more of like the lower tier firms actually. So I think if you genuinely find a good match for you, then it's something you should still go after and really believe that it can work out.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks so much for coming to the panel. Yeah, you guys have been brilliant, and thanks so much for giving us so much of your time and so many of your insights. I think the audience really got loads and loads out of this, and hopefully are feeling a bit more confident as a result. But guys, do stick around, audience that is, because Alice and I would like to take this as an opportunity to launch our mentoring platform.
Yeah. So we're going to talk in a second about the mentoring scheme, but just a huge thank you. So stay on the line, and we've got a massive group of mentors who are ready to help graduates who don't have a job yet. But in the meantime, let's just say goodbye to our panelists, because they've stayed way over, and really thank you so much for your time that you've taken this evening to help people. Really inspirational stories and great advice from all of you. And so thank you so much for taking time out of your evenings and holidays as well to join us. Really genuinely appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Cheerio. Best of luck, everybody.
Bye.
All right, good luck.
Thank you. So to Harry's point, so basically I meant to talk about it at the beginning and then totally forgot with all the other advice. And I think, so I run a startup which is called Redbrick Ivy. We are a members club targeted at people who are graduates and alumni of top universities in the UK and Ivy League in the US. And we also for young professionals in the UK. And so everybody talked about networking, and I can imagine quite a few of you were thinking, like, how on earth do I network during a time like this? And so essentially the members club is launched to encourage more people to talk about their careers, to make friends post university, because sometimes people stay in their like close networks and groups. And we normally run supper clubs that are industry specific for incredible young people who work at Goldman Sachs, BCG, McKinsey, who are doctors, lawyers. It's an amazing group of people. And we've been running most of the supper clubs, obviously during normal times you would have to pay to attend, but we've been hosting some virtual networking events. So if you go to, I don't know if we can show this, but if you go to www.redbrickivy.com, that's red the color, brick walls, and Ivy like Ivy League. If you sign up to become a member, you can get access to those events. And some of the other students who have turned up onto those calls have ended up asking for advice. And I mean, it's very low key. We're literally there with like wine and Zoom, and people go around Zoom rooms and talk to each other, but have been asking for advice. And one thing I will say is people love to give advice. And I think everybody wants to help in any way they can right now. So really use this as an opportunity to ask people for advice and support. And so we actually, knowing that we were doing this event, emailed out to all of our members, and we've got close to 100 people who have signed up to offer a free mentorship call. And so we've set up an application process. But, you know, there's almost 100 people, so your chances are relatively good, definitely worth going into the application, filling it in. And, you know, for us, it's important that you send us your CV and what you're interested in, but also if you don't know what it is you want to do, but you need help, that's absolutely fine. You do not need to tell me that you know, I want to be a lawyer at this specific firm, or I want to only work for Goldman Sachs. Like, if you don't know, that's completely fine. And I think Laurent also has gifted everyone a HelloFresh discount code. I forgot to say that while he was on the call. It was very generous of him. So I think what we're going to do is send out an email. Harry, tell me if I'm wrong here, but an email tomorrow with all of these details of how to sign up to Redbrick Ivy, the HelloFresh discount code, and also this survey that you can apply to get a mentor. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say as well. So of the mentors who've signed up, we've got people who are from all the top universities and different age ranges as well, who are literally superstar VCs. Some of them, we've got like an MD from Goldman Sachs, VPs from some of the top financial institutions. Our members are really, really interesting. And so like, honestly, I would quite like to be mentored by some of these people. So really would definitely recommend you filling in that form. I know it might feel like a bit of it might take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to fill in, but it'll definitely be worth it if you end up with a mentor at the end of it. And irrespective of whether you get a mentor or not, you can sign up online to become a member of the club. It's totally free to join. And hopefully then we'll see you at some events as well, where you can meet people virtually, and then later on, once things open up in real life as well. So Harry, tell me all the things that I said wrong.
No, that was entirely right. Yeah, I'd just like to to reiterate that point of, if you're someone who you say, I want to work at Goldman Sachs, you apply to the mentorship scheme, and then we can put you in contact with someone who works at Goldman Sachs, who will then be your mentor. And it sort of goes without saying just how much that can help in your career journey. And this is true for any any of the main industries, so law, consulting, and even if you don't know what you want to do. So I really just want to stress that point of just how helpful this mentorship scheme could be, and to encourage you guys to apply. We're going to email you all, as Alice said, tomorrow, with a follow-up email where we're going to send you the form which you need to fill out to apply for this mentorship scheme, and then we'll also send you the discount code to HelloFresh, which Laurence has very kindly provided all of the viewers of this call. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we hope to see you at future events. We hope to see you applying to this mentorship scheme. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Alice.
Thanks so much, Harry. Thank you for organising and hosting, and I genuinely hope it was useful for everyone. I think the speakers really had a lot of amazing insights to share. So good luck over the next month or so, and hopefully we can try and help you get a mentor, and maybe see you at some of the events as well.
Great. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.